Why have I quit my job? Why have I, bought a van? And why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities. And it's going to be really an amazing experience. And I look forward to you joining me on the jar. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mental Health Today. That was a little audio I had done, almost 2 years back now. Crazy to think it's that far back, but about 2 years back when I was contemplating getting on the road with the jar. You see the van being kind of topped off and finding, looking for that common thread. And over time, it really was the journey so many people have taken around mental health, and really struck me. On taking a break around December, I had a couple months to ponder, what I was going to do with the jar when I resumed. And part of that was to add on this podcast, Mental Health Today, and talk about the challenges people are having and really get into the solutions. Honestly, quite honestly, this is really a show about people who tell a little bit of the story about how they ended up in the space, and really a lot about what they're doing and what their experiences are. And then any ideas that we may have, we may be able to conjure up on ways we can improve mental health delivery, the ideas, and just have good conversations around, how to improve mental health today, in the US and really around the world. Kind of cool. Every once in a while, the universe goes full circle. And Karen McCracken, our guest sitting there. Hi, Karen. Thanks for being a guest again. And I met Karen almost exactly a year ago in Kentucky, and she was a guest on the jar. And we had a great connection, and just the work she's doing, she's inspired, truly inspired, and doing a lot, and has had a pretty interesting personal life journey as well. And it's just funny to see you working on your next book, Karen. And it's like came across my LinkedIn, and I'm like, you got to come on you didn't know the mental health show today existed. And I had kind of forgotten about your side stories. And so it's like, it's great. You belong on this show. And so thanks for coming on, and thanks for carving out some time. How's everything going?
Great. Thank you. I'm glad to see you again. It has been a year, and things are going pretty well. It's been an interesting year all the way around, I think. Things are good, but busy. I think I have a lot of blessings, but with a lot of blessings comes a lot of accountability and a little craziness. And
that is kind of funny, right?
Yeah, they go hand in hand. It's when you ask for something and then you get it, you better be prepared. That's all I'm saying. So things are good. I have a book out. I got another book coming out in the spring, and things are good. When you were here a year ago, and we talked about everything under the sun because it was the jar, which was so much fun, by the way. I love that, and love all the episodes. I really do. It's so interesting. So many more people have so much in common than we think we do.
Yes, right.
Isn't that great?
All across the U.S., all shapes and sizes, colors.
Yeah, it is.
We're all human. We're all human.
And then when I saw this podcast, the Mental Health Today, I was really psyched because we didn't really get to talk that much about mental health when we were doing the jar, because, you answer the questions that come out of the jar.
Yep.
But mental health, being mentally healthy is a huge theme in my own life as well as in my family's life. And so that's something that as soon as I saw you were doing this, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to be a part of that too, because this is important to me. I think like it is important to you. Yeah. Yeah.
It surprised me. It was not on my list. It was not on my bingo card last year. mental health.
Yeah.
But I was open to the idea of what would it be. I think in the important part of my words there were, we're going to find out what those common threads are, and we'll talk about it. We'll bring it back. And that's the process we're in right now. Tell us what's going on. What's your, I think this is a fun part. Maybe a little bit of background about, some of the challenges you've had, how you ended up, how does mental health become so prominent in your life? And you've got a beautiful story, but I want to focus less on that. And then I want to get to the OCD stuff in your book and what you're doing in the space to help. But maybe just share 5 minutes with people, Why is it top of mind?
Uh, I grew up with mental health issues. Of course, at the time we didn't know they were called mental health issues, right? I'm old enough that no one talked about stuff like that,
Yes,
right?
it's weird,
Um,
right? Yeah.
that's right.
It wasn't even a word.
No,
You were
no,
either mentally ill or
right.
something else, or they didn't talk about it.
Right, it was a hush hush thing. People
Yeah,
just
you
they
were just
might have talked
mentally ill.
around you, but they didn't talk to you about it. Yeah, exactly. So for me, having OCD growing up, of course, I didn't even know it was called OCD growing up. Not until I was in college did I know what it was called, and that I wasn't the only person this way. So, it was a real struggle. We today we have the Monica Geller, idea of what obsessive compulsive disorder is from a friend, we have or a movie idea or even
Mm,
even some of these reality shows really aren't very real. Some of
yeah.
them are, some of them aren't. So, we had that idea. So it was very important to me, but later in life, uh, after I was married, and actually my first marriage did not go well. I got divorced, and OCD was part of the reason. But yeah, exactly. And then
Shockingly surprising.
yeah, and then when I worked through a lot of my OCD, and I wrote a book about it for that reason because I thought, okay, wait a minute, other people need to know that you can help yourself and that you can get
Yes.
help from other people, and there's no shame in it. And so mine is a faith journey as well as a self-help
Mm,
journey. But also then when I got married, I married a man that, unbeknownst to me, had extreme PTSD from being a firefighter paramedic and other things that had happened in his life. And I married into a family that was in the middle of grief because his wife of 16 years had passed away of cancer. And so they had an adopted special needs son. So our son, I later on adopted him, but our son also has OCD, and he was born fetal alcohol, so he has other issues as well. But me going through OCD helped me to be able to help him
yeah.
through his
Yeah.
OCD. It even now though when it goes unchecked, he has severe issues from it. So mental health,
Mm,
he spent time in a psychiatric facility and various things. So
oh,
it's mental health is a huge deal. And I think, when you just look around today, as well as I do. I mean, you've interviewed so many people
mm.
on the jar. I don't even know what portion have attempted suicide, and
It's
suicide
good.
is a
Wow.
real impact.
One
And
in
that's
one in
something.
10. Yeah, one in
Yeah,
10 of my guests.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's why it's important to me. And I don't honestly know any family anybody that I've met, and I've spoken around the country
Yeah.
as a speaker. I mean, like 400 times, 400 different places, 400 different venues, and I've never been anywhere where I haven't met people who have mental health issues.
Mm.
Never.
Yeah. I was so surprised. It's such a thread in the show, the jar show, right?
It is. Yeah.
And and it just got to be where it's quite normal. I mean, I don't meet people generally that haven't had real life challenges where they had real difficult moments in their life, and or people around them with mental illness, even not even just tough moments of mental health, but managing mental illnesses. Not easy.
Yeah. And I don't think it's new. I don't think it's new. I mean, I think since with my faith, I believe, in Adam and Eve, and
Mm.
since they got kicked out of the garden, I think I mean, look at Cain and Abel. Hello. Dysfunction has been a part of our world from the
Look
get
at Cain
go,
and Abel.
you know?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
pretty much baked. I think it's baked into the human condition. Right.
Right. Right. So I don't think it's new, but I think in the last 10, 15, 20 years with social media and more awareness that people are more willing to talk about it
Yeah.
and help each other through it. So I think it's more the norm than not the norm. And
Yeah.
I think and that the like you said earlier, they used to call it mentally ill.
Yeah.
um we call it mentally healthy or unhealthy, and I think
Yeah.
that's far more befitting because I think that our brains are so complex and so amazing,
Hmm.
and we can do so much with them that they're susceptible to illness and to dysfunction just like any other part of our
Yes.
body,
Yeah.
you
Tell
know.
me a little
And
bit
so
about
it's
your book.
go
Tell us
ahead.
about the book coming out. What's
Oh, the
that's
book coming
the
out,
yeah. What do
The Woman
you what
Stand Firm.
oh
Is
no,
that the
Woman
book you're talking about?
Inspired.
No, no, Woman Stand Firm is the name of the book.
The
Woman
next one.
Inspired. Oh, say that again.
What is the next book coming out? The one you were on LinkedIn just recently.
That is Woman Stand Firm.
Woman Stand Firm. I'm sorry, that's it.
Uh-huh.
Woman Stand Firm.
That's it.
Tell us
Yeah.
about it.
That's Armor Up in the Battle for Your Identity. And that is a book about faith and how the world tries to tell us we should be all of these different things. You should compare yourself to other people and you should look like this and you should talk like this and you should label yourself this or this or this. But that's
Hmm.
not the way I believe that God made us. And I believe the Bible talks about that. We were born to be who we were born to be. And I believe that God has a lot to say about that. And I think our faith goes back to my faith goes back to how we should be gaining our identity through Christ, through God, who God made us to be, and not
Hmm.
feel pressured by the world and trends and, women who are trying to change themselves constantly to please somebody else or to please the world. And so the book is really directed towards women, but there's a lot of principles in it about how just, you know, we try so hard to please so many people or to get attention or to do different things, men and women alike, and how
Yeah.
we can stand firm in our faith. We don't have to try to change ourselves for somebody else. I don't think any of us are perfect. We weren't born to be perfect, but we can be the best version of ourselves we can be.
Yeah. On any given day, I can be my best version for a few minutes. You're not going to get me there all
So-
that for, I ain't going to be there for
right,
12 hours in the day. You'll get
right.
the best version of me for a good 15 minutes. And
Right,
after
but you
that,
don't have to, you don't have to change who you are. I
absolutely.
think we all have
Absolutely.
our own journey and our own place in this world, and I think we all have a purpose. And when we try to
Mm.
change ourselves left and right, we're going to miss that purpose. We're going to mess it up.
I'd agree. The purpose thing is so interesting. I just interviewed a gentleman who has a really interesting life story. Like his backstory is pretty cool. And he just moved his family here to Flagstaff and he got let go from the firm that brought him. So after 18
Oh,
months, they said, sorry, now we're out of money. Basically, it's a faith-based company and they don't have people coming. And so he's the new guy in, he's the first guy out. And he's just shell shocked, right? Because building the community, you want
mhm.
to stay here for till his kids graduated from high school. The wife moved in, she's built her practice. So it's like all of a sudden, losing that, your whole dream is shattered, right? Everything you planned on is gone. And I was kind of saying, but based on your background, man, this is your gift. Because you've got this amalgamation of your interest in food and food culture and spirituality. He's a religious guy. He graduated with a degree in philosophy and religion. He came down here to be kind of a minister in a way. So it's interesting, but he's looking at it. He's got a very eclectic background, and this is the chance for him to put it all together and find his purpose, and use
That's
all
great.
those little pieces and tools. So the one thing I loved about I don't know if it's this book or the next book or the last book, but you talk about a woman being too much or not enough.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
the
love, I
Woman
just
Stand
love
Firm.
that. I love that
Yeah,
quote. I was like,
thank
because that
you.
is so much what it's. I don't know. I have no idea what it's like to be a
Yeah,
woman, but that just seems like words that have probably come out of my mouth describing
yeah.
women. Like sometimes
It is.
she's too much,
Yeah,
or
I
she's
think a
too
lot of
quiet.
women
She's
do.
got to shine. She's got to come forward more. She's got to be more
Mhm.
assertive. You
Yeah,
know, and these are like
yeah.
work things that immediately pop into my mind. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
I've said both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, women say it about other women, men say it about women, and I think it's
Oh,
yeah. I mean, it's and then we go around this comparison thing. But yeah, I don't know how many times in my life I've been told I'm too much or I'm not enough or one or the other, and it's like okay,
yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
in here we gotta we gotta work this out because somewhere in here is the truth, and the
Yeah,
truth
somewhere in here
is
is
that
the truth.
you're right. I'm just who I need to be, and as much as that doesn't mean you can't improve yourself. That doesn't mean you can't make yourself
Mm,
healthier. That doesn't mean, but to totally radically try to change yourself because the world says you should be something else, and identifying, what I talk about in there too, and this a lot of this I think sometimes plays into women's mental health is we try to morph ourselves into something else to please other people, or we wrap
mm.
our complete identity into the
Yes,
role that we play. So, okay, I'm
yes.
a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a whatever. But when we do, what happens when life changes, which it does? What if you become widowed or you become divorced? So you're no longer a wife. Who are you then? So if your identity is totally wrapped up in the role that you play or a title you have or a job that you have, then who are you when that changes? So, I mean, what are we going to constantly seek? We need to find out who we are for who we were born to be, however God made us to be, so that when life
Mm.
changes, because it will, tragedy happens because it will, or even great big blessings happen, and they will, it could still change our roles. We need to know who we are. So when those changes come, we don't lose our identity. So that's what
I
the
think
book's about.
that's okay. Well, that's interesting because that's really what my interview was this morning. I, that describes it so perfect, Karen. Really, they had, and they, as a couple, had wrapped their identity around the church, around the organization.
Mm,
This is where they were going to
yeah,
be.
yeah,
Um, it's probably where they spent their free time to volunteer. So all of
yeah.
that unwinds because you can't. You're not employed there. You're going to go back, I guess, part of the
A congregant. Yeah, yeah. You're going
congregate,
to
right?
attend.
But that's very
Hmm.
different. It's a very different, weird, very different relations because you've been scorned in a way, right? I mean, that's a rejection, and that's so
It sure is.
there's a career thing involved, but there's also a personal thing, a social thing, and I think you're right. People wrap themselves up in the role, and when
Yeah.
you lose that role, and you can be set adrift.
Lost. And I think it happens just as much and maybe more with men than it does women because I know
Hmm.
my husband was a firefighter paramedic for 24 years and he got injured and I think I talked about this on the
Yeah, yeah, we
jar.
did.
He got injured in an accident in the ambulance. And so he had no choice. They wouldn't let him come back to work. It for a good 2 years, he felt like he was lost. He had to completely get retrained and do another job and something where he wasn't lifting anything and all of this stuff and his whole identity, I didn't realize how much his whole identity was wrapped up in being a firefighter paramedic. And so
Mm.
it's something that I think both of us have learned over the years. Yeah, but I do think it creates some severe mental health issues. You could, you know when you feel like you're lost and you don't know who you are.
Oh yeah, you don't know, especially when you really, like you said, when you've got a hard, good identity, and that's your identity. And people
Hmm.
know, how many people know you as that person? You know
Yeah,
yourself as that person, and all of a sudden you're not that person. That's that's like
yeah,
psychologically, that's pretty heavy stuff. How
right.
do you bounce back from that? Um,
Especially when something you had that you attached your identity to was so positive and you were so proud of it and so happy with
oh
it.
yeah,
But what do you do then, if your spouse cheats on you and then you end up divorced, or you end up in a
yes,
relationship you didn't realize was going to be volatile and you end up victimized, or,
mm,
you end up in a car accident and you're disabled and you can't do the job you did before. It has a negative connotation and what do you do then? So who we are is greatly dependent on, I believe, on who God made us to be, not the roles that we play and the titles that we give ourselves.
so that's the funny part. So therein lies the conundrum. Is what
Yeah.
baseline can what can you create that's unchangeable, that
Hmm.
is valuable. Like you said, it has those other components that being a firefighter has. So what else
Right.
can you do that's important in life? It's a
Yeah.
really interesting way to look at your purpose as opposed to finding it somehow searching and finding it. will lead to something, beautiful, and you'll live your purpose. But from your standpoint, it's finding your purpose is important for life, for you to go through with, the least amount of trauma and turmoil is finding your purpose and developing it.
Right. Well, and the thing is we're not finding our purpose so that we're important.
Yeah.
We're important because we
Yes.
are. We're just important because we are. If we, we're here. I'm still here. That means I still got a purpose. And that purpose can change. That's just life. But I'm important just because I exist. You're important just because you
Yeah.
exist. I believe if you weren't important in some level on some plane or another, then you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be breathing, and you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And the fact is that we have free will. So some people just skirt their purpose. They don't
Yeah.
care. They
Okay.
they they use they use what they are and their gifts and talents for bad things, and we see that all around us
Hmm.
every day. But those of us who don't want to live that way, we have a choice, and so we just have to walk in that purpose and the
Hmm.
knowledge of that. If we're here, it's because it's important for us to be here.
That's quite interesting. I love that. I love that frame. If you're here, you're important. And
Yeah,
it's let's use the important word. If you're here, you're important. And then
yeah,
it's important that you find out why you're here.
yeah, yeah. And there's purpose in it. There's purpose in pain. There's purpose in the plan for your life. There's purpose in the fact that you're breathing air. You know,
Hmm.
so that's how I feel, and I think that does tie back to mental health, and that was hard for me to see. Like I said, it's growing up, and it was until I think I was in my early 30s. It was my early 30s before I
Yeah.
really had a handle on the OCD and could move beyond it to go, okay, wait a minute, I have purpose, and to it was actually faith as well that helped me work through the OCD. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it used to control 100% of my day, 100% of my day. I remember having OCD behaviors from the time I was 8 years old on up. That's my first recollection of really having OCD behaviors. And you know how I found out I had OCD? Phil Donahue. I was I know. I came home from
Wait.
college one day, was getting
Okay.
ready to eat something, studying. I just flipped on the TV, and Phil Donahue show was on there, and they were talking about OCD, and I saw this guy on there flipping a light switch on and off, and I'm like, I literally dropped. I wrote this in my book. I literally dropped my Dr. Pepper on the floor, just went everywhere, and I was like, "How did they?" I'm like, "How did like this person is doing what I do?" And I thought I was the only one that
It's
did
like,
this, and it was really
yeah, it's like
weird. And
trickery.
yeah,
Like
that's how
this
I
is a
found
lie.
out.
Like that there's not somebody like me.
Yeah, that's how I found out that what I had was OCD. But it still took a lot of years and a lot of faith. And I actually worked. I prayed one day, and it just all came to me how I'm supposed to deal with this. And OCD is based in fear. You're just afraid of everything. And so
Oh,
one
okay.
day I prayed, and
Huh.
I really it just really washed over me. I prayed for God to take my fears away, which I had never done. Isn't that crazy? I'd never ever prayed. I was a praying person, a person of faith. I never prayed for God. I just prayed for him to help me get rid of the OCD stuff. I didn't pray for the underlying issue to go away. So it changed everything. It changed the way I look at things. I realized, okay, wait a minute. I have these behaviors that I'm doing, like counting and repeating and tracing numbers and excessive cleanliness, which there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's it took COVID for everybody to realize that clean is good. I'm just saying.
I
Anyway,
I love that. It took everybody else time to realize my OCD around cleanliness is
it
the
was
right
a
path.
good thing. That's right. I was keeping the planet safe long before everybody else was. So, but anyway, I realized that all of these things I could manage them. If my brain was smart enough, which I have a phenomenal memory, if my brain was smart enough to remember all these things and be able to count and do all these things, and my brain was smart enough, I could use my OCD to control my OCD, which is what my book's about. I used my OCD to control my OCD behaviors. So I felt like if I'm going to repeat stuff, if I'm going to count stuff, if I'm going to
Yeah.
obsess on anything, I'm going to obsess on something that's positive, something that's affirming. So I took note cards and index cards and pieces of paper, and I wrote quotes from the Bible. I wrote quotes from famous people, things that were encouraging to me, and I put them everywhere, in my pocket, in my purse, on my dashboard of my car, across my mirror, next to my bed, everywhere I could. So anytime I wanted to count, which was a huge deal, a huge time and energy sucker in my life, it just took me a long time to do everything. So anytime I wanted to count, or I wanted to repeat something or do some sort of OCD action, I would obsess on whatever that thing is that was closest to me, that quote, that thing, and I would read it over and over and over again. So those positive affirmations and those positive truths from the Bible, they got in my head instead of the numbers, instead of the obsessive other thoughts that I was trying to think and other things. And so, and I didn't know that they actually have different types of behavior where you do things like this. But this was something I'd never
Yeah, I was
been to
gonna.
therapy.
Yeah,
No, never been to therapy, never did anything like that for it. I was too afraid to. And so this is what happened. And within a year, 90% of all my OCD behaviors were gone. I did this religiously, like with everything. I took one OCD compulsion at a time, whether it was counting or repeating. Like I used to have this problem where I would repeat everything somebody else said in my head. So like just say something to me right now.
yeah, I would say, like, "Hey, Karen, thanks for being on the show."
Right. So in my head, I had certain numbers that were safe numbers, like most OCD people do. And so I would repeat in my head, "Hey, Karen, thanks for being on the show." And I would repeat it in my head 4 times before I could ever respond to you. And there was some sort of fear attached to not being able to do that. I would have to have, silverware in the drawer a certain way, knives pointed a certain way. I'd have to do a ritual of certain steps of things before I go to bed, when I showered. It was every part of my life. It would take me to fold, just let's just say, one basket of towels. It would take me
Right.
about 35, 40 minutes, because I would have to fold each towel a certain number of times, and each towel would have to be the exact same way. So my entire life was taken up by the time I was in my mid
Whoa.
20s with OCD. It was just, I functioned before that because I was hiding it, but it got to the point where I couldn't hide it anymore. So I had a couple years, and this was during my first marriage, where I barely left the house. I couldn't even keep a job because I was so bogged down by this. And once I started doing this and I started praying more, because I got to where I couldn't even pray. I couldn't even read a book fully, and I couldn't even read my Bible fully, because I would have to repeat everything 4 times or 7 times. So you can imagine how long it takes you to read one little verse in the Bible,
Except
or one
at
chapter in
least
a book.
at least 4 times longer.
Yeah, yeah, at least. So
At least.
yeah.
Oh
So
my
when
god.
I
That
started
is a
switching my
bananas.
thought, it is it's really hard. It's very hard. And it can take up so much of your mental, it takes up so much of your mental
Yeah,
energy. It
yeah.
just does.
Even energy, physical energy and
And on top
stress.
of that, yes, it's physical energy. And on top of that, you still have the fears that are underneath it. Like for some reason, I had this fear that if I didn't have the knives in the drawer the right way, that like pointing the right direction, that someone was going to get up in the middle of the night and use one of those knives to kill me and my family. That's something I had from the time I was little. And it wasn't until I was healing from OCD and praying that I was watching TV one day, and an old movie came on TV, and there was a man that was getting a drawer and had snuck into a house, got into the drawer, and a knife out of the drawer to go kill the family. So sometime when I was younger, I had seen a clip from that movie, or seen that, because I knew right away when I saw it, that's why
Oh, you
I
knew.
think. So different things
Oh.
had attached into my brain about different thoughts that I had to get rid of. And so once I knew what it was, I knew that I could conquer it. So I just had to continue to pray for God to shine some light on, why am I afraid of this, or why
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
afraid of
Well, I'm
this,
afraid of that.
and yeah, and so that made a huge difference,
Mm.
and that helped me uh, when my son started having issues, our adopted son, when he started having issues, to be able to help him understand what was going on with him. And I did my best, but I think mental health is a very personal thing. So you can,
Yes.
especially with a child, or somebody who has some developmental issues, you can work really hard to get them help, but at some point they do have to try to help themselves. So
Hmm.
it's been hard, and he's been actually on medication for years for different mental health issues, including the OCD, and it doesn't always work, and especially someone who refuses to take medication at times. And he went through a bout last year where he refused. He stopped taking his medication. He's in his 20s now, and he stopped taking his medication, and he refused. And he lives in a he doesn't live with us. He lives in a home with guys who are just like him, and that helps him a lot.
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah.
as independent as he can be.
Yep.
But he decided he wasn't going to take medication anymore, and it all caught up with him. So he had a really rough summer last year. It was last June, June 2022, and he actually tried to kill himself.
At the
And
end, right after all,
he,
being off the meds and everything.
being off the meds a few months, he slit his wrist. It was
Dang.
a very, very horrible time for all of
Oh
us.
man, you had to go through. So that's brutal to go through this.
That was in June. And so,
Oof.
people, I think probably, and I may be wrong, I may be sensitive to this, Ken,
Mm.
but I think probably more than any other mental illness, people make fun of people with OCD. People make light of
I
obsessive compulsive disorder because it's
it's
been in a lot
yeah.
of movies and a lot of different things. It's so funny because somebody's so clean. It's so funny to, oh, well, let's rearrange their stuff. Let's do this. But they don't understand the stress and the fact that behind all those little actions is actually a fear. And when you live in that
Yeah.
kind of constant fear, it can send you overboard. And I think,
Oof.
for me, my son knew from early on. He knew God. I think this is my personal opinion, but I think a lot of people who have maybe diminished mental capacity or lower IQ,
Mhm.
I think they get an extra special blessing. He doesn't think about a lot of stuff and let all of this world stuff get in. He just kind of knew. He just kind of knew God. There was no barrier. I think he just knew about God and love. But the problem to that is I think a challenge for a lot of Christians to go. So I don't believe that this is it. What you see right now, this isn't it. When we leave here, we go on, right? We go on
Mhm.
someplace else. Well, when you have severe mental health issues, boy, that looks even greater and greater. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. And I've had that feeling myself. I've had to fight that a few times myself in my life. And it
Yeah.
just it was just too much for him to fight. He just didn't want to be here anymore. And when you have
It's
fears,
tough.
but you're not afraid to die and you know what's going to come next, that looks a lot better than living in fear every day.
Yeah, just fast forward. I'm living in a home. I'm not gonna do things that other people do. And yeah,
Yeah.
but he hasn't found his purpose yet.
No, exactly. I was just gonna say that. Good
Yeah.
thinking, Ken, because I
And
was just gonna say the same thing. But when you have
yeah,
that purpose, like,
yeah,
I knew somewhere inside me, okay, I had a purpose beyond
yeah.
living in OCD. Once I wrote the book, which was really cathartic, and it came out in like 2013. It's still available on Kindle, on Amazon. It's called Breaking Free from OCD, and Karen McCracken. It has my maiden name in there too. But if you find me on Amazon and any of those books, or you can go to my
Yeah.
website and click on it there, you can get it. And it's just, I felt like I needed to do that. I needed to help other people. I feel
Mm.
like we have a responsibility that when we go through something and we have some victory in any way on the other side, we're supposed to turn around and help other people through the same thing. I just feel like that's
Absolutely.
no, that's part of our purpose. I think what you're doing has great purpose because you know that people need awareness and help with mental health. But I also
Mm.
think the jar has great purpose because not only does it illuminate some of the issues that we all have in common, but it
Yeah.
illuminates the wonderful
Yes.
things that some of us have in common. And that's one reason why I've enjoyed it so much. Uh,
Yeah.
it's beautiful, and I think it does come down. I think if there's a thread of purpose throughout the jar, I think
Mm.
there's a thread of purpose throughout this
I love
podcast
that.
as well.
I love
Yeah,
that. Those are beautiful words. Thank you, Karen. Those are beautiful. That's beautiful thought. That does put some. It does put a little. Kind of hard to say. Not quite articulate it, but it does make me frame the way I look at the jar differently, because it has its own purpose as a kind of a living, breathing organism that it's become.
It does. It
Hmm.
really does. I have several
Hmm.
people that I've referred it to and they listen to it and they'll send me a message, text me and say, "Oh my gosh, did you listen to episode number da da da? If you haven't, you need to listen to this."
Oh,
So it really does. Yeah. In case you didn't
there
know.
are no. I mean, I don't know, right? I'm just grinding away, and um, you know that what you're capturing is magic in a glass, in a way, right? I do
Yeah.
feel like there's moments catching people at a particular time and recording it, and it's there permanent, for them to go back to, for their family, for their grandkids. Imagine your
Yeah.
grandchildren being able to hear your story, or if you were to hear your grandfather's story
Oh
or your
yeah.
grandmother's story. I would die for an episode of my grandpa on the jar.
Oh, that would be
Um,
wonderful, wouldn't it?
wouldn't it? Yeah, and so that's kind of part of my motivation now too, is I've taken on this permanence of it, this record, and recording it and leaving it out there for people. Karen, it's an awesome conversation. Womeninspired.com. You got one book done. You got one book done, two done. Uh,
Yeah, I have one coming out in
one,
the spring. The
it's
next
coming
one
out
is
this.
Woman Let Go. Yeah,
Okay.
it's called Woman Let Go, Release the Grip of Unforgiveness.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that one. I already love
Yeah.
that. Release the grip of unforgiveness. I
Yeah.
mean, that's probably that might be the biggest common thread on, like, an aha for so many of the guests, is like everybody shares the concept, forgiveness is not for you, it's for the other person, and you should forgive for these reasons. And the way people share it as such a tidbit of knowledge, I know that they've just discovered it. It's not old. They're not speaking from wisdom, they're speaking from enlightenment. Like, did you know that you should forgive for the other person? It's amazing, and they're sharing it. And I'm like, damn straight. I love that. Um, so
It's
it's
great
fun.
when you can. It's great when you can, and it's great for the other person. But sometimes um, it's not possible for the other person to even know that you've forgiven them, and it's
I,
still important for yourself
it's
to
still important.
forgive. And it's also one thing I address in the book is forgiving yourself, which is one of the hardest things to do.
And this
Yeah,
is, man, when I flip that question on to have you forgiven yourself, there's always that dead air pause,
yeah, yeah,
and you just feel the breath.
yeah.
It's
It's
heavy.
hard,
It's
but it's
heaviness, right?
possible. Yes, it is. It's hard, but
It's
it's possible.
totally possible.
Yeah,
Forgiving yourself is
yeah.
very easy. You can be like me and be a, kind of cavalier about it, and just whatever. Okay, I forgive myself because I'm an idiot, and and I can't keep track of the next five things I'm going to do that I should forgive myself for. So I'm just
Yeah,
going to let it
as
all.
I get as you
I have
get older,
blanket
it doesn't
immunity.
matter as much because you can't remember what you did
Can't
anyway.
remember anything in it, and the list of crimes is so long that there's no possible way I
Right.
can go back and account for everything, right? So
Oh.
I've given myself blanket immunity.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just,
yeah, giving yourself grace is so important though,
yeah,
because I think that really, it can hold you back from anything you want to do, including relationships and dreams and goals. It can hold you back from your purpose if you're
yeah,
holding on to unforgiveness. I mean, just yeah,
oh, it's just
I
roasting.
could
It's just
talk
putting
like for
yourself in the
another
sun.
hour. I
Yeah,
could talk for another hour about
we
forgiveness.
could. Oh
Yeah.
man, well, let's come back. We'll do, let's come back in a few months and do forgiveness when you release the book.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. I would love
Let's come
that.
back and
I would
talk
love
about
that.
forgiveness. We'll talk another hour. Karen,
Okay.
thanks. I mean, awesome. What you're doing is great. Keep going. You're on the right path. And man, I could not imagine, your son doing,
He's
going
doing
through
well now,
that.
Ken. Yeah, he's doing pretty
Sometimes you
well
come out
now.
of sometimes he needs to see that dark side of himself to realize.
He's he's determined not to ever refuse to take medication again. because
I,
he feels the difference now. And so thank God for that, thank God for that. So we're very happy about that. So something positive came out of it, and we have to look at it that way. But he's
yeah.
doing okay.
Well,
Yeah.
he's figured it out, which is, yeah, you feel
Yeah.
great. You feel great without your medicine until you don't. And,
Exactly.
and then you
Yeah.
don't, and it's not good. It's not easy to get back to feeling good for a long time. It,
Well, and there's
it
nothing
takes the
wrong with
time.
taking medication if you need it, and
Yeah.
he was like, "Oh no, I don't want to take it." And I'm like, if somebody who has diabetes, because he has a family member who has diabetes, didn't take their insulin, they would die.
They'd be
It's
dead.
no different. It's no different. It's no different taking mental health medication than taking any other kind of medication you need. It's about your health.
Yeah.
So
It's good to hear. I mean, I'm glad that's worked out, and that
thank
he's
you.
come
It
away with the lesson.
was a rough time. Was a rough time last
Uh,
year. Uh,
I can't imagine. That's like a parent's. That's
yeah,
in your worst night. That's your worst nightmares as a parent. That
it
phone
is.
call is the worst phone call. God bless it.
It is.
He's come out
Yeah,
stronger,
yeah,
and probably your relationship is probably even tighter.
yeah. We have a really good relationship with him. Both
Oh,
my
good.
husband and I do. So we're very thankful. It's been a long road, but we're very thankful. So I thank you so
Good.
much for having me back on one of your podcasts. I appreciate it. I really enjoy getting to talk to you
Yeah.
and visit with you,
Yeah, it's good.
and for
You kind of
putting a spotlight on OCD. I appreciate that too.
Yeah, and like you said, making fun of it, and it's a good reminder that there's no mental health issue that's worth a giggle. It's
Not really.
especially when it's at the cost of somebody else. Um,
Yeah,
and like you said,
yeah.
it's not it's a trigger point as well. So doing that stuff is
Mhm.
also could send somebody into a really bad place.
It could. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. And, especially people listening on the recorded version, you're driving around your car and you're catching up on this, just go to womeninspired.com and you can find out a lot more about Karen. She's great human and has a absolutely great story. You can catch one of our shows probably posted around October or September of last year. And, it's a great episode. Be sure and find that, reach it out. Karen, hang around for just 30 seconds. I got a little commercial and I'll see you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, loose, baby.
But we're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals at Public Glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glassblowing. Yeah, we're gonna go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.